lot of association executives, a lot of people has ideas on revenues and how to generate revenues, but there's always like a line between understanding what a non-due revenue is and what general revenue is. Like, what are non-due revenues, and what are the common misconceptions that people have about non-due revenues?
Yeah, if that's it for me, I think non-dues revenue. I think if we look at any association, we look at member dues, which are the dues, which are your dues, whether they're voluntary or if you're a regulatory body, your members, are, I will say, arm twisted to pay their membership dues. And so everything else is really buckets into non-dues revenue. So I think when you look at all of the different categories, how I break it down with any association, as I say, what are your membership dues? So what are you earning annually for your members, from your members for their membership dues? And then let's look at everything else. And you're probably going to get to some questions around how do we increase that. But I don't think I'm not sure there's too many misconceptions about non-dues revenue. I think a lot of associations think of sponsorship as sort of the primary driver for non-dues revenue, but there's education, there's granting, like grants, federal grants or provincial grants. I think everything. So if you just basically I look at it, like if I go into an association and look at their budget and go, okay, where's all the money coming in from? And everything outside of of member dues, to me, is a non-dues revenue line item. And if there's some you may not be able to increase, and some might have some real potential. And so that's where I would always start.
Right, right. And as you talked about, so anything that has to do with, like, so the first thing that in terms of revenue generation is your membership dues, and anything apart from that, which is generating revenue for your association itself, can be considered as non-due revenue, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think I look at it's just if you break down the term itself, non-dues. So anything that's not membership dues. And I think there's some primary, if you look at most association budgets, it's probably, member dues, sponsorship, government granting. There's some familiar line items that you'll see in most associations. Education. So maybe if you run a certification program or a designation program, that could be a line item. There's conferences and events. That's a huge one. So a lot of associations have their annual conference or their event. And that can be a huge revenue line for associations. So that is a non-dues. It's not member dues. So therefore, it's a non-dues revenue line item. If that makes sense.
Right, right. And as you talk about sponsorship, and this has came up so many times as well, that many associations struggle to convince their potential sponsors, like basically struggle explaining the value that they can provide, like to partner with them, to connect with them. So can you share like a real life example of how associations can effectively secure a sponsorship deal that can significantly boost your revenue?
Yeah, I think I would go back a step and say, what's your value proposition for your association to begin with? So, like, why are members joining, and what do you have to offer? And so, if you look at it holistically and go, okay, we're the association for, I just got off a call with an association that was in the childcare space, and we were talking all about their annual conference and ways to raise more money, and so you look at the value prop, like who's so for specifically for sponsorship, it's I call it, we call it the WIFM, what's in it for me from a sponsor. So if I'm the association of dentists, I'm going to look and go, okay, first of all, who wants to be in the room? Let me go back a step. Do I have a supplier category member? So do I have members that are association members, and do I have a business supplier member category? Those folks are the ones that want to connect with your association members. That's your first prime target of potential sponsors to elevate their relationship with the organization. If they're already paying member dues as a business member or a supplier member, there may be more that they want to do, and maybe not, and that's okay. But maybe there's more exposure that they want with the association members, and there's more that they can contribute, depending on their budget. And so I think looking at the value prop of the organization, looking at from a sponsor's lens, it's not really, I promise you, it's not, I have people come to me and say, oh, we want to make more money and we're going to do it through sponsorship. And how can you help us? And I say, well, it's not, people aren't just waiting to give you money. you have to think about it from the sponsor perspective. So what do they want, and what are their objectives, and how do we meet that? And what's like, have you ever tried asking your sponsor what they want? And so they're not endless bags of money that just give you money and you can just, they're not a necessary evil of like, oh, well, they're going to give us money. Oh boy, we got to actually do stuff for them. Like, majority of the sponsors they'll have a decent size engine and money and resources, and maybe even more resources than you have at the association. So use them, like get them integrated into what you're doing and help them elevate your program, help use them to help elevate your content, your program, your whatever you're doing. It's not just give me the money and I'll put your logo on something. Like, how do you make meaningful relationships with these organizations? Because quite likely they can really help drive member value. So
Right, right. And if you think about starting like a sponsorship program, being an association, right? Why do you think you'd want to start? Like, do you first connect and learn from your members, like what more value that you can deliver to them? Or should you just start speaking with the partners and then understand what the partners can provide to the members and add to the benefits to your members itself?
yeah, the first thing I do is do basically an asset check of like what assets do we have to sell? Like what is our value proposition as an organization, and what assets? And by assets, I mean conference, education, webinars, corporate partnership, benefits, thought leadership, events. What do we have to sell, and why would it be appealing to anybody else out there? That's the first step, and go, okay, yeah, right. We've got these really cool things that we do, and we think that there's an audience there. Now, there's steps that you can take. Maybe it's a focus group with potential, supplier members or potential sponsors, or maybe you've had sponsors in the past that have left. So you talk to them, hey, why did you leave? What was there no value? What was the value? What was the problem? But I would first take stock of what are you offering, and do we think that there's some value here for a potential organization to sponsor, and from there, then I would start doing a bit of the things that you talked about, and as focus groups or interviews or talking to members or a bit of that research. I would first take stock of your value proposition and what you're doing. Like what are we fundamentally offering? The sponsorship can't drive the business. It can be a nice compliment, but you can't change your programming because of sponsorships. Like, you got to take a look at all the things you're already doing and finding value. Who would find value in that? And then take all of those assets. And then there's a whole pricing strategy and everything else. But I would first take stock of, okay. And listen, a lot of associations that have been around quite a while, they'll there may be some inbound sponsors. So, most associations will at least have one or two sponsors that have been around. So there's sometimes, if sponsors are approaching you, there's obviously something there.
Right, right. So thank you for sharing your thought process in regards of like how you're acquiring sponsors for your organization and how association can work in their sponsorship project as well.